down, down, down. Relax. Well, thank you for coming tonight. This has been just a really, really fun project in which I get a chance to kind of combine my professional interests with what I do with for recreation, and it's something my wife and I both do together. So this all started a couple of years ago. I was actually training dogs to find nests of the western pond turtle. It occurred, I've been doing it visually like everybody else does for a couple of years, and just really tedious work. And so I trained another dog, Chilko and Rogue, to find these pond turtle nests by scent. I figured, well, if predators can find the nests, I could teach my dog to do it. And it took me a while, but we were successful. We got a little bit of media attention, and then a couple of years ago I got a call from a botanist with the Nature Conservancy, Greg Fitzpatrick. And he said he saw about the work about the dogs and nests, and he says, could dogs be used to find rare species of plants? He was in charge of doing some extensive surveys for several rare prairie plants on a bunch of BLM land. Some of it was on pretty steep terrain, and I think he was just trying to think of a way that he might be able to get a dog to go up on those hills and save himself some footsteps. I have never heard of dogs being used to find rare species of plants. Well, you know, I knew they can find cannabis, and I knew a bunch of other stuff that they have been used for. So I called some trainers with this group, Working Dogs for Conservation, who have been at this work a lot longer than I have, and brought them on as collaborators, and we kind of went to work on training the dogs to find Kincaid's lupine. The Fish and Wildlife Service right now is got a draft recovery plan that is, it covers I think about 10 or 11 rare prairie plant species, listed species and species of concern, as well as the Fender's blue butterfly. And just to kind of prove the concept of whether or not dogs could be used to find species of rare plants for conservation purposes, we chose Kincaid's lupine for a couple of reasons. First of all, of all the rare prairie plants, this is one of the least rare, and it was going to be easiest to find training and study sites. The other thing is that if the dogs were successful, because it's host to Fender's blue butterfly, we might be able to get, you know, some added value for doing these surveys. And so most of this work was done in the middle of the Willamette Valley, near Corvallis and near Eugene. Detection dogs have been used for conservation purposes for probably 15 years or so. These are some examples of some recent studies that are showing up in mostly wildlife literature. It's like in wildlife science, the number of papers that are showing up with detector dog applications, it's kind of like snowballing, and you're seeing just a really wide variety of uses that dogs are helping out with. Bad carcass recovery under wind turbines, where they're trying to measure bat and bird mortality underneath these wind turbines. A woman on the Olympic Peninsula who's been at this work much longer than I, Barb Davenport, trained a dog to find the fecal materials of the Atlantic white whale. They use, and most of these scat and fecal detection projects are motivated to find the poop so that they can get genetic materials and study the population genetics of these species.
Is that on beaches?
No, in the ocean. They put the dog on the front of the boat, and they start doing a grid, and the dog can detect the smell of these fecal material for like a kilometer away.
They float.
And they float. And so they're just using the dog to direct the boat and the biologist right to the material. So that's been really a successful project.
The dog's in the water?
Yeah.
Or on the boat? They put them in?
They put the dog in the front of the boat.
But not in the water?
No.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. As far as I can tell, there's only been one other species where one other plant species that dogs have been used for like a conservation purpose, and this is a thesis by Kim Goodwin at University of Montana that is using dogs to find spotted knapweed and another species that's an invasive, that's a real problem in the Rockies, Dyer's Wall. Don't know anything about it. But as of yet, there's not a single paper that's shown up in peer-reviewed literature about using conservation detection dogs for like rare plants or things. And I'm finishing my manuscript very soon. Besides the vertebrates and just a little bit of plant work, they've been used for different insect purposes, insect survey purposes, for 20 years or more. And as far as I can tell, it's always been just kind of like pest interdiction. And now with the big bedbug infestations, like especially back on the East Coast, you can go on the internet and you can find, well, I looked a couple of days ago and I found a dozen companies advertising the services of bedbug dogs that will go and, I mean, it's becoming such a huge problem back east in motels, and it's so expensive to eradicate these from bed bugs from these rooms. They really need a way to detect the infestations, just because they need to save money somehow. And dogs have been really, really well at finding some of these pest species that have got economic significance rather than real conservation purposes. The goals of this project that we started back in 2007 was to really try and provide another tool for conservationists that are interested in trying to conserve these native species. And it was, we're thinking ahead. So far the work has always been directed towards the Kincaid's lupine so far. We're thinking the next step now will be to put the dogs on Fender's blue butterfly. And the original thought was to use the dogs to find eggs. As I started learning more about Fender's blue butterfly, individual eggs that are, you know, like a half a millimeter, it became kind of clear to me that even with the best dogs are going to really have a trouble in a natural setting finding a target that tiny. I think they might be able to do it in a laboratory setting, but so I think we might have better success with the dogs finding Fender's blue larvae, and we're searching for some funding to do that work coming up soon. So I'll start talking about the kind of giving an overview of our training activities that we started in 2007. Go on to the training methods, or really the testing, the evaluation methods of the dogs that we did in 2008, and then kind of wrapping it up with the results of our work and where we might be able to take it. 2007 we started with 5 dogs, 3 German Shepherds, Rogue, and an Australian Shepherd. And pretty much any dog has the nose, the olfactory capability to do this work. And we choose, it just really, on this project, they were just all herding dogs of 3 different breeds, and that's really just a coincidence. Labrador retrievers, golden retrievers, a number of breeds have proven that they can do this work. We're just looking for individual dogs that have a natural inclination to use their nose. They have to be really trainable. They really want to please the humans, and that's really all you need. And then we kind of went through these 3 phases in training: the scent boxes, which I'll explain, and then kind of gradually going on to small area searches, and then by the end of 2007 we were going into pretty large field settings. So these scent boxes are a method that are used for training narcotics and explosive detections, and it's all based on principles of operant conditioning. And any of you that have done a little bit of like dog obedience training, you might be familiar with clicker training. And so what you do is you pair that target scent with a marker signal, and which we used were these little mechanical clickers. And the clicker signals the opportunity to get a reward. And there's something, and dog trainers, I don't think anybody has really explained it perfectly why telling the dog with a good boy or a yes works better than giving this mechanical click. But there's something about the sound. Maybe it's just the consistency of that sound rather than the variation in the human voice, that it's just really, really a powerful signal. And so as soon as that dog gets to the target, you give them a click to signal that that's the right behavior, and then you give them a reward. And it's a really, really powerful training method. We use these hollow concrete blocks. One of them will have some lupine clippings in. The other ones will, first of all, they were just empty. Then we started putting in other plant scents to make it the discrimination a little bit more difficult for the dog. The handler just leads them along the box, and the dogs that have done this work for a while, as soon as they see this line of concrete blocks, it's like, okay, I get the picture, I know what's going on, and they'll start investigating the boxes. And they'll stick their nose in, and then when they get to the one with the target scent, they get the click and the reward. For a rogue, the reward is a food treat. For the other dogs, it's a little game of tug or something like that. And it takes really very few repetitions before the dogs get the idea, they're conditioned that, okay, the human wants me to find this scent. And then we shape an alert behavior, what the behavior that the dog uses to signal that they found a target. And Rogue's alert behavior was originally, we trained him to lay down whenever he found the plant. And when we got out into the field setting, we found his alert was just so enthusiastic, he would just crush the Kincaid's lupine right there. And so we quickly retrained him to sit next to the plant. Yeah, that was pretty embarrassing. So this work in 2007, it just it really didn't take more than a couple of weeks, training an hour a day for a couple of weeks. We've got a couple of handlers, and then we've got a training supervisor who is objectively taking notes on the dog behavior, so that she's measuring or she's observing errors, not only to kind of find error rates, but also to try and figure out what's triggering the errors to help the handler do a better job of training the dog. We graduated from this conditioning exercises to small area searches. We kind of defined a really small area, maybe a radius of 3 or 4 meters, and we would hide a couple of little lupine cuttings on that. The whole idea is to make it fun and always make it successful for the dog. Because to them, this isn't work. It's all fun and games to the dog. And so we really do our best in the training to make it surefire success for the dog. And so with the previous conditioning work, they were able to quickly find the lupin cuttings in the grass or the natural setting. And then we're starting to expand that search area. We're starting to incorporate much greater diversity of plants and odors that they're going to encounter, so that the dogs, as they're working through this problem, we're expecting them to work for longer durations. We're making it physically more difficult for them, and then we're slowly making the discrimination problem more difficult for them. And as I recall, our training criteria for the conditioning was they just had to correctly identify 80% of the time of the scent boxes. And have fewer than 20% mistakes. And really, after like week 1, they were at almost 100%, practically error-free. By the time our funding came through in 2007, it was already early June. By early June, the lupins are starting to, most of them have flowered, a lot of them have gone to seed. By mid-June, some of them are desiccating already. So we were doing this work in 2007 at the very end of the season, and we wrapped it up feeling pretty successful about the progress we had made, but we needed to really do more rigorous testing of the dogs. So the dogs from Working Dogs for Conservation came back to Corvallis in 2008, and we started work again. The whole idea was to kind of measure 3 parameters: accuracy of their detection, their capability to detect Kincaid's lupin at a distance, and then just how fast can they cover ground. And so we were testing them on plots, and 3 of the 5 dogs came back. One of the dogs just didn't make the standards and was retired because he just wasn't up to it. Another one of the dogs was retired because of old age, and we came back with 3 of the dogs from 2007. So on a plot that we tested the dogs on, there could be 4 possible outcomes. Some of the plots had lupin on, some of them didn't. So the dog could either, on a plot that had lupin, the dog could correctly give an alert behavior, or they could walk past the plot without making a detection of alerting, and that would be counted as an error. Most of the plots didn't have lupin on, and so the correct response by the dog was to just go right past. We had a couple of false alerts on non-target species.
How big were the plots?
Let me explain that in this next slide. The plots were 5 by 10, but they were arranged in these belt transects. And the transects were, most of them were 70 meters long. There was a couple that we couldn't fit in, and they were 40 meters long. The plots were arranged in these transects, but the actual unit of test were these 5 by 10 meter plots. And the dog and the handler had not been to the site before. They had no foreknowledge of the occurrence of lupin. They did know that on one of these test sites, at least one plot was going to have at least one lupin plant. That's all the foreknowledge that I had. And so it was, had this kind of semi-fixed pattern. They started at one corner, they'd make a pass down one side, they'd go down the middle, and then go down the other side. And it was left up to the handler to determine how the terrain and the wind might be affecting the scent plume. And so usually they would start the work downwind of the plant to maximize the chance that the dog would be able to catch that plume of scent coming off of the plant. And then all of these, the work was being supervised by Debbie Smith, who is an expert at training these dogs. But for these purposes, she was just collecting the data and trying to make the objective determination of errors or correct responses. I think I said all of this work was being kind of done on different sites around the middle of the Willamette Valley Chip.
Did the handlers know what the lupine looked like, so that they could like give it into the dog or anything, or did they just kind of cruise through it? You would think we would have known. I'll tell you one story. On one of the earliest plots that we tested the dogs on, it was on a prairie restoration site down near Eugene, and we were going to test all 3 dogs. There were 3 different transects located on this restoration site. Rogue was up first. We put him out, and I'm handling him, and we go to this. I go to the corner of this plot, and I can see lupine. I can see some pretty big clusters of lupine, and so and that's the way it was on a couple of plots. And so we started, and I tell Rogue, search, and he starts walking past lupine, and it really threw me for a loop. And I said, search, and he kept walking past. And we thought, okay, Rogue is the most inexperienced one of the dogs. Let's put him away, and let's get out of one of the expert dogs. Same thing. He starts walking past, and then we just say, oh no, oh no. Because I've been taking that opportunity on the test plot to do some retraining. And so I got my clicker out, and I started using it as a training opportunity rather than a testing opportunity. We take some photographs and some clippings back, and of course it's not Kincaid's lupine. The dogs know it, and stupid wildlife biologists didn't.
What species was it?
It was a really big one that now I see.
Polyphilus?
Well, it was not Kellogg's spurred lupine. I don't know. It's kind of got this red purple stem. It can be as big as quite a huge shrub. And
Regularis?
I think it might have been Regularis. It's like we showed the samples to Craig Fitzpatrick, and he said, "You don't." It only took me another morning to retrain Rogue.
When they did false alerts, was it to other lupines or?
I'll get to the errors a little bit later, yeah, because it's most of the mistakes were not by the dogs. So I've got just some photographs of the dogs working here in 2008. And so this is Alice Whitelaw from Working Dogs in Conservation with her dog, Savo. And Savo has been doing kid foxes and grizzly bear scat and some invasive snail in Hawaii. Debbie Smith, who was supervising these trials, and Alice, they've been at this work a long, long time. And so this is Alice and Savo approaching a plot. Alice is just kind of like figuring out
she's going to use Sabo. Oh, actually, you know, I forgot one really important point. So, before we started this work, we talked to the botanist. We said, you know, if you had a dog to help you find Kincaid's lupin, a rare species, how would you use it? And we got some different answers. There were some people like Craig that would like to use a dog that could work really independently and just like send them out on a great big hillside and work, you know, maybe hundreds of meters away from the handler. And when they came across a patch of lupin, they would just bark or something to bring the attention to the handler. The other theme that we got was some of these plants occur in really dense vegetation, really tall grass, and they wanted to find the really little tiny plants. We couldn't train the dogs to do both, work detail and work wide, and we trained the dogs to do this really fine detailed work. And I have to say, really, the only reason we did that is because it was going to be really difficult to find study sites where we had Kincaid's lupin occurring over, you know, maybe 40 or 50 acres. And what we had was a bunch of little test sites, and with very tall grasses, you know, poison oak and blackberry. And so we trained the dogs to do these really detailed searches, usually within 10 meters of the handler.
When a dog knows a variety of things to hunt for, how do you tell it which one it's hunting for?
You don't. We give them refresher training before, you know, Rogue's been doing this work for 4 years now, and some of the dogs have been doing the work for 8 or 9 years. And when you go out to start a new project or a survey that the dog already knows, you give them a little bit of refresher training. But the dogs don't have like special down. They don't have individual alerts or signals that to say, okay, I found a pond turtle nest over here, or I found a Kincaid's lupin over there. They have just 1 or 2 alerts, and it's up to the handler to decide whether it's Kincaid's lupin or a coyote scat or whatever.
Right, but how do you clue them into that's what they're looking for today? You give them a sample of the sample?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. And the other thing is, I don't have enough experience doing this, but Alice and Debbie, who've got dogs that have worked from the Mojave Desert to Yellowstone to Hawaii, they tell me that their dogs get a feeling for the habitat. And when they get brought out to a forest in Montana, they know it's grizzly bear. When they get brought down to the Mojave Desert, they know we're going to be looking for desert tortoises. So, yeah. So this is just kind of a typical habitat. Actually, we chose study sites that with a lot of different kind of habitat features. And so we had sites with kind of a lot of tall grass. We ran into a lot of shrubby areas where we were dealing with blackberry. We wanted to test the dogs under all kinds of conditions. And so you can see maybe a couple of the flags that are marking the corners of the plots. All of the work was done pretty early in the morning. These big dogs, they overheat pretty fast, and so by the time the temperatures were getting up to like 70 or 72, we wanted to be done with the work. And so we were usually at the study site by dawn and working for a couple of hours. This is Camus, another one of the German Shepherds, giving an alert. You can see the Kincaid's lupin kind of hitting in the grass there. And it just so happened that all 3 of the dogs that we were working with this in 2008, they were all using sit as an alert. But it could be a bark, it could be, some of the trainers train the dog to come back and like grab the sleeve of the handler and bring them right to the plant. It kind of depends on the physical setting that you're working in and the species that determines what the alert's going to be. And like I say, this is all about making the job a big gain for the dog. Rogue got a food reward when he found a target, but I really think the reward, the work itself was rewarding enough. I think he's out there doing it just because he just wants to please me. Most of the dogs are chosen for this line of work to have a really high desire for play with a human or a very high prey drive. So you can channel that desire for play as a reward for for the working behavior that you're trying to shape or maintain. Okay, yeah, so this is getting into the results, and this is really an ugly slide, and I'll just try and interpret for you. We were trying to keep track of the detection distance. Each one of those colored columns corresponds to one of the dogs, and then trials 1 up into Rogue had 12 different trials. And we kept track of the detection distance, the maximum detection distance that a dog exhibited on one of those belt transects. And the way we could tell that a dog first got scent was, we call it the hook behavior. The dog is kind of walking along, kind of straight, and then they'll be coming downwind of the plant, and there'll be this plume of scent coming off the plant. And as soon as the dog's nose enters that plume, it's like this. Once you've seen it a couple of times, you just can't miss it. The dog's head just snaps, and it orients towards the direction that the scent is coming from. And so Debbie would mark the location where she first noticed that hook behavior, measure the distance to where the dog actually found the plant. And they were reliably, finding plants at, 6 or 7 meters, and up to 16. The thing is, they're probably capable, under some circumstances, of finding the plants much, much greater distances. Particularly, Kincaid's lupine, it grows in clusters, and some of the clusters and some of the plants can be pretty big. And I think the dog should have the capability of maybe finding a big Kincaid's lupine plant from, probably 30, 40, 50 meters. The thing is, in the way we set up the test, there was no advantage to going a great distance. We would find the dogs detecting plants way off of the study block, and they would turn off, and you could see they were going for it, but that wasn't part of the test. We allowed it a couple of times for the dogs to follow their nose, just so we could see what they might be capable of. And so easily they could do it at 10 meters, and I think, under different testing circumstances, they could probably do it at 50. This was kind of like the most important part, is trying to test their accuracy. 378 trials between the 3 dogs total, and there were 5 errors. They misclassified. They either missed or missed a plant on a plot, or they false alert. And we thought that was really pretty incredible. We were really, really happy how quickly it was to train the dogs to make that kind of discrimination so quickly, and what they were able to do, and then when I came back, so we finished this work in 2008, and I came back and did a little bit of work in 2009, early this spring, when the lupin were just emerging. I mean, these were leaves, plants with just 1 or 2 tiny leaves, and Rogue remembered it immediately, and he was finding those plants at 6, 7 meters, and these were really, really tiny. So, we were keeping track of their surge speed. It doesn't. It probably turned out to be not very useful information because there was no penalty the way we had set up the trials. There was no penalty for taking time. We were timing how long it took for the handler to be satisfied that she or he covered the transect carefully. But if they wanted to spend a lot of time on the plot, there was no penalty for doing so. So these search speeds are probably pretty conservative, but it also really depends on the setting. If we had a lot of shrubs or a lot of blackberry to go through, that took a lot of time to get through, as of course it would for a human surveyor also. So, 5 errors. I mean, when you get to that level of error, I mean, you can't even do anything with statistics. It was really what was most useful was just the observations and notes of the trial supervisor and what was going on. And there were handler errors, and I can give you, I gave you one example already where the wildlife biologist didn't know what Kincaid's lupin was or wasn't. We had to throw out those plots out of I mean, we just botched that so badly, we threw them out of the test completely. They weren't in the data set. But another a behavior handler error was the handler and the dog was going down the transect, and the dog got distracted, went off the plot, and the handler went to call the dog back and didn't go onto the plot where they had left. They went on to the next plot, and they had missed a plot that was occupied by lupin because they didn't ask the dog to actually search that plot. We called that a human error. The dogs are masters of manipulation. They do want to get the rewards, and so for instance I can tell you, Rogue, we were going down the belt transect, and on one of the first plots he finds a Kincaid's lupin. Alerts. I go over, I give him his reward, and we have a little party to say good boy and all of that. We go on, and it's like he's looking, and in the back of his mind, he's remembering that plant back there that he got a food reward for. And so you can see the dogs just kind of like arcing around. And if the handler, as in my case, I didn't catch him that time. I mean, I caught that behavior so many times and got him back to work. This one time, I didn't catch it. He went back off and alerted at the wrong plant, and it was classified as an error for some reason. And then there were a couple of circumstances where there was just so much Kincaid's lupin off the plot that had masked, like there could be just like a little tiny plant on the plot that was so overwhelmed, and the dogs would just kind of like go right over it. That happened.
Maybe the dog was just hungry. Now, how do you monitor the caloric intake of the ones that use?
Well, we want them hungry. Yeah,
Yeah.
we do want them hungry and motivated to do the work. Yeah, it's they're just really, really smart dogs, and you gotta stay one step ahead of them. That's mostly it. Let me tell you where we are right now. We finished that work last year, been writing the manuscript, hope to have that published into some botanical journal or plant community journal. Hopefully have it get submitted this fall. And as I say, so far this work has been appearing in the wildlife science literature a lot. It has yet to be used on botany projects, and for that matter, insect conservation work either. There's all this insect interdiction work, but really the possibilities, I think, for using dogs to find rare or difficult to detect species of plants or invertebrates, it's really unlimited. This year, road was being used to find nests of orange-crowned warblers and Swainson's thrushes. Camus has been working on kit fox scats down in the Mojave Desert. Savo has been working on kit foxes and was over in Hawaii looking for this snail. We've been looking for fishers, Pacific fishers in Maine, I think. So the dogs are kept really quite busy. We think using the dogs to find nests of or eggs of Fender's blue butterfly. Once we saw the problem, those eggs are probably just emitting molecules of scent that maybe another butterfly can find it. But I think in a national setting, it's going to be for us difficult for us to tackle that problem. But we hope to, like I say, get this funding to go on to the larvae of Fender's blue, and who knows what other species are out there in our future. I think that's really it. We got probably time for questions. Yeah.
Would you just mention what you discovered on the orange-crowned warbler nest, your description of the
Sure.
deer early?
Yeah. Okay. So this is the project that I was working on this year that just kind of made kind of a fascinating turn. Working with avian ecologists at OSU, who last year had 12 technicians working 4,800 hours out in the Oregon Coast Range looking for orange-crowned warbler nests. And in 4,800 man-hours, they found 3 nests. And when he heard about our work, he thought, wow, maybe using the dogs to find birds' nests. And again, an application I hadn't heard of conservation detection dogs being put on yet. So we got a little bit of funding from OSU to start working on that. And we collected a couple of orange-crowned warblers before the nesting season, and I was using wing feathers to train Rogue and one of my other dogs, Chilco. A single wing feather, starting out with the scent box work. And then we were doing some small area searches, and they could find a single wing feather 10 meters away or more, depending on the condition. And so I thought when the nesting season starts, this is going to be easy, with all the scent around a bird's nest. That's a much larger mass than a single feather. Well, we had the biologists that were working on the project. They were out there looking for orange-crowned warbler nests so that we could train the dogs. And when they found some to put the dogs on at first, we go out there and just like Kincaid's lupine, we're doing these small area searches. I know where the nest is, because this is all a setup, just to train the dogs. But the dogs don't, and they're walking over these nests time and time again. They're walking over the nest without detecting. And it just had us scratching our heads, what is going on? And because we thought it would be such an easy problem for them. And we started looking at the nests, and they were lined with a lot of deer hair. And that didn't surprise us, because we knew that birds line their nests with mammal fur, to thermal insulation. But then it got us thinking, well, we were thinking maybe that deer hair is camouflage for predators that are using their olfactory senses. The deer are all over the woods, and I'm sure they're shedding deer hair all over the woods. And so perhaps by incorporating a lot of this deer hair into the nest, they're camouflaging their own scent. And so I was scared because the dogs weren't doing what we had hoped they could do. But the avian ecologists were getting really excited about these new questions. And so now next year we're going to be using the detection dogs as surrogate predators to see, by varying the level of deer fur in different kinds of nests, to see if it how it affects the detectability. But birds are...
How high were the orange crown
The
warbler?
orange crown warbler nests are ground nesting birds, and in fact, I swear sometimes they're underground. I mean, they make a domed nest, and so we're thinking that by making the dome nest, that's probably capturing some of the scent, keeping it, from keeping the scent plume a little bit smaller. And really, I mean, we found orange crown warbler nests like in road cuts that are really back in the banks, like you see cliff swallows or something. And we find them so deep in under like sword fern foliage, or I mean, they're way down there. And so by a little bit of maybe perhaps camouflage, a domed nest, and there's just no air movement down in this really dense grassy vegetation. And so there probably is not much of a scent plume. And what we thought was going to be an easy project turned out to be really, really tough. We went on to do the Swainson's thrush, which creates a nest 1 meter to 2 meters up in a shrub or a small tree. The dogs were having a lot more success with that species. The nests, for whatever reason, had much less deer hair in them. And just because of the elevation of the nest, that scent plume gets carried a lot further, and it was easier for the dogs. So, yeah.
Did you find feathers in both species nests, or could they have been removing the feathers?
The birds are meticulous about keeping their nest clean, and they carry any feathers off. Fecal sacs are removed, and so, you think, well, it's hygiene to keep the parasite load and any kind of disease down, but also all of that material would be much more easily detectable by a predator. And so, it's just got us thinking a whole lot more about what birds are doing with their nests. And the one more point I wanted to make about the Kincaid's lupine is we found that the dying plants, the ones that had gone to seed and already were starting to desiccate, were easier for the dogs to find than plants in flower. And, I'm sure the chemistry of these plants is always changing from the time they're, in full growth to the time they're flowering to the time they're desiccating. And I don't know what the chemistry is, but something about it makes the dying plants easier for the dogs to find. So we might be able to extend the survey season too for Kincaid's lupin and some of these other rare bird species. Yeah.
In sort of a practical sense, you've got some butterfly conservationists wanting to protect the Fender's blue. How precise do you have to be if you got 500 acres and you want to know how much lupin is out there? It would seem that the dogs, even at a high air rate, could give the kind of information that the butterfly biologists would like to have.
So what's the information they want to have?
Well, I'm asking you. It seems that about all they want to know is, well, how much lupin is out there.
Right.
And that could almost be a sample basis that the
Yeah.
dogs are doing for you.
What they were in, at least Nature's Conservancy was envisioning was these reconnaissance surveys to detect presence of Kincaid's lupin. And the whole time we started with Kincaid's lupin to prove the concept. Where we'd like to go, at least with personally, what I want to do is start layering different scents and developing specialist dogs. Dogs that, I'm not sure it's going to be cost effective yet to train a dog to find just Kincaid's lupin. First of all, it's a species that's not too difficult for botanists to detect. But if you could train a dog to do 6 or 7 wildlife, plant, and invertebrates associated with prairies in the Willamette Valley or old-growth forests. So the dog has got, maybe a dozen species hardwired into its brain, and it could be coming across, Kincaid's lupin plant, or a nest of a western pond turtle, or a Willamette daisy, or you can kind of just let your imagination run wild. We already know that some of the dogs that have been doing this they're keeping 10 species in their head, and they can remember it for years. And so it could get really cost effective if a single dog in just a year or so could be trained to learn a dozen species. Yeah. Yep.
When you actually would be called upon to go to work, the photograph you have up there looks like a pretty big field. Would you be starting at one end and just having the dog go out in a straight line and then for a distance and then come back and just work across that whole field and just determine whether there's Kincaid's lupin there? Or do you have to really set up something with flags and so on so that they're going from one flag to the next? And you really have to walk it all ahead of them to sort of know the pattern that the dog's going to have to follow.
When you go from kind of like this research, the preliminary testing that we're doing, to actually doing work, a real world survey, you have a three-person team. You've got a dog, you've got the dog handler, and then you've got somebody called the orienteer, who is either by map or GPS or something like that is navigating, so that the orienteer is ensuring that the whole place was covered, and the handler can just pay attention to the dog. And how you work the environment kind of depends on the species. Kincaid's lupin, where you've got a fixed plant, what you probably want to do is like some kind of grid, and like I'm thinking, we could probably have grids at or transects at a 50 meter or 75 meter spacing that the handler and the dog are kind of walking along. What we found, like where we're thinking of going with the bird's nest, is the necessary searches are done in conjunction with point counts, where surveyors go out at fixed points and they're listening for, bird songs. And so you've got this previous information that the dog handler can use. It's like we've got all of these fixed points around the environment. We already know which ones where you've got territorial male orange-crowned warblers singing. So rather than searching this great big huge field, we can just go where the males are singing and concentrate all of our effort where we've got the best chance of finding nests. So yeah.
When you were talking about efficiency, if a dog has a repertoire of 12 different species for a particular zone, must you do 12 different explorations? Or can a dog, could be sent out and he gets to the lupine and he sits down, and he gets to the pond turtle and he sits down?
Yeah.
That's possible?
Yeah, it's possible.
To send him out with a repertoire of like 12 things at once? Wow.
Yeah, and it's that level of capability. It's not being used for conservation purposes, but it's used all the time for like drug detection, where those and other different law enforcement purposes, where those dogs are, they've got a huge repertoire of scents. Any one of them will trigger an alert. Yeah.
Maybe I missed it, but all of these are herding type dogs rather than what I would think of as a real scent kind of dog, like say a bloodhound or something. Is there a reason why they're all herding dogs?
They tend to be herding breeds or hunting breeds, not bloodhounds. And actually, all of the breeds that have been developed for tracking, sometimes they aren't so trainable. I mean, it's like, if it's a pheasant, I mean, it's like it's hardwired into their brain. But trying to teach them to do a snail, that's sometimes, and it's just something about herding dogs from their earliest origin of the breed. They were trained to respond to what humans want them to do. Whereas some of the other dogs, like, bloodhounds, they do what humans want them to do too. But it was set for such a narrow purpose that they don't have a lot of plasticity in the behaviors that you can shape out of them. And with herding dogs and a few other breeds, it gets down more to the individual dog than it does to the breed, really. And working dogs for conservation, they just made the decision this year that they're no longer going to be going to breeders for their dogs. They're going to be going to the shelters and testing the dogs, and then just pulling them out of shelters and giving those dogs a job. And there's plenty to choose from, and they know that their tests are so reliable that they can do a pretty good job. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come up and speak to you. Here, Bart. Louder. Bart. Twist. Spin. Zip. Down. Sit. Good. I'll just say that I've got a laptop set up in back, and I'm going to start a video. I think it's 12 or 15 minutes long. That we took some clips of the dogs actually doing the tests last year. And so I'll just get that started, and that'll be out in back on my laptop.
You had your hands on it? And in the woods when we get snow? You get it.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you. Don't grab my finger. I trust her. You know those little dog barges on the barges and
I was too busy for a while.
I was going to say.